wonderful to be here. I feel more like I did now than I did when I came in, right? There's a number of things I'd like to say prior to our beginning of the Thesis 2019 fall cohort. A booklet that our reviewers have in front of them was put out literally at 11:59. I think it's actually quite good. It is a route and general plan for the next 3 days. There are going to be 6 thesis students presenting today, 3 before lunch, and then the afternoon. Tomorrow the same, and Thursday the same, very civilized. And it's 8-hour deal. Right? Right.
It's just the IRT.
That's the IRT. Remember that thesis? When we had the expansion of the Federal Reserve Bank in New York with the IRT right next, literally sharing a wall? Okay. We're joined today with a number of very nice people who decided to come and join us to review these projects. 2 former key professors, Mike Marshall and Amy Weinstein. A number of former students of mine, as well as some of my colleagues, Alec Deary, Susan Salzberg, Cecily Bedford, and Monica Passatori. And then we're joined by Grant Radford, who comes to us from Howard University today. So we have a very good lineup. We have 6 projects. We're going to go overseas first. We're going to go first to India, and then we're going to go to Northern Ireland, and then end up in Jakarta this morning, and then this afternoon we're coming back and doing some projects related to water. Water's going to be a big theme to look for. It's going to be a major change in our climate, as you know, and water's going to play a part. Anyway, so here we go. Mohit is going to take us over to Assam.
Okay. Hello, good morning, and I have to say namaste in Indian term, and good morning. And my name is Mohit Dobariya. So this thesis is proposes that the holistic tradition and ancient way of life the weavers in the village of Sarkuchi, Assam, India are forward-thinking model of sustainable urbanism. So, and if we talk about the Indian handloom industry is like from so long time it was an integral part of India, and 4.3 million people are directly involved with this. And it's providing direct employment to over 13 million. Indirect employment for over 13 million people, and it's the 2nd largest employment provider after the agriculture in the rural areas like smaller villages and smaller towns. These products are known for in entire world because of their unique design and fineness. And India has a agroclimatic and geographic conditions, so all the regions, you can see here, all the regions and all the states have different kind of fabrics based on their raw materials they produce. They grow, like in Gujarat, in Assam, they produce the silk. From the silk farms, they get the silk fiber, so they are using the silk as of making the fiber, making the fabric. And in the Gujarat, where I belong from, we are making the bandanis made out from the cotton, like that, the same kind of thing. They have a different fabrics in India. And this is taking you to the Sarkuchi, Assam, where it is like in the world, it's India. And if you see me as India, in my like left hand side, and like this is the Mumbai, my heart is Delhi, and this is the Assam. Yeah, so you get better because everybody knows Mumbai and Delhi. So these are the seven states over there. We call it the 7 sisters, and this is the Assam. Is a dark orange. Go down, it's Assam within that the Kamrup district, and that's the orange is Sarkuchi village, and the other side of the river is the big city Guwahati. That's a major city of the 7 states. So main livelihood of the South Kochi is the silk fabric production, and these people are dexterous in the weaving of the silk, and they are like in the daytime they do the farming and the dyeing and the weaving. That's the main culture of the South Kochi. So, and because of the modern urbanism, and they don't have the places for the weaving, the good places you can see in this picture. They are using their homes and living rooms for using this kind of loom, putting this kind of looms and do the weavings, and they're using as a street as a some other process. We will see after this. So main objective of this thesis is providing the place that will provide this kind of places like weaving and living spaces that will provide practice of the tradition and craftsman's way of life and holistic way of living as a driver for sustainable urbanism and the development. So let me take you to the journey into the handloom weaving. What's the handloom weaving? So we'd like to acquaint you with the different stages in the process where individual fibers come together to become a beautiful fabric. So first step is getting the fiber. So in the life cycle of the silk motif, you allow develop from the pupa, is this one, and from this stage in the cycle of the silk can be created, and from first adult mulberry silkworm butterfly put the eggs, and then it's developed from the eggs. When it's get the adults, it start to generate the silk and making the cocoons, and after the cocoons, its cycles roll back. And they collect the cocoon, they boil it, and after that, they take out the silk fiber from that. And the second is the hand spinning. Hand spinning is basically process of converting fiber into the yarn. This quality of yarn based on the who's spinning that, how they spin that, it's based on the spinners. They use the chakra, it's called the spinning mill. In Indian term, it's called the chakra. And the vertical spinning frame and other spinning frame. Usually this process done by the women in the households. And the third is the dyeing. They dye yarns and then they weave. They don't dye the fabric. So this process is usually placed in the closer spaces. So wind cannot disturb the fire. Not more fires, but a little bit they have to warm the liquid, and then they use the drying spaces as a backyard, courtyard with the bamboo stands. And the fourth is the bobbin winding. Bobbin winding is the similar kind of process. They use this chakra again, and they tie the threads, yarns in the smaller bobbins, and it's usually placed in the outer corridors of the homes and the smaller factories in the villages. It's also done by all the women. And fifth is the warping. We did the bobbin. We get the bobbin, all the bobbins. They put in the bobbin stand, and they warp all the threads into the line. Warping is the process of creating the base yarn that runs along the length of the fabric when they're weaving the fabric. For the 46 inches wide fabric, over 3,200 individual yarns runs along the raft. So they have to put the one by one and make the one single lined up. This usually done in the indoor spaces. It can be also done by hand, but it's really time consuming, so now they are using this kind of big spinning wheels. And street sizing. In this process, warp are stretched out into the beams, and the natural adhesives are applied to add to the strength to the yarn. Sizing is carried out by the weavers specialist in the village. And since this process is done in the street, that's why it's called street sizing. So they don't have like really big kind of spaces, like linear spaces that they do in the street. And they use some tools like GPO, setting brush, that the guy is holding on his shoulder. That's a big setting brush, and bamboo stand they use for stretching out the yarns. And then attaching the loom, attaching the wrap to the loom. In this process, wrap will be attached to the loom. In this process, individual wrap threads tied into the become located with the both ends of the looms. This is the model of the smaller miniature model of the hand loom. So this is the two beams that tied along with that. Yeah. People are sitting here and reading there. And the waft winding is a kind of bobbin winding. So it's a smaller bobbin, it's facing the wooden kind of waft. So they can use the horizontal, they can pass the horizontal threads into the fabric, so fabric can tie up with the interlocking threads. And the last is the weaving. The process of the weaving is the interlacing of the two sets of yarn, the warp and the weft. Warp is going vertically and the weft is going horizontally in the threads. A perfect wave demands coordination between mind and body. The weavers achieve the harmony of the motion and the rhythm to create unique and beautiful fabric. So this is the finished product. They weave the saree. It's 89-inch long, 38-inch wide. They have straight 7.5 inches. And another fabric what I'm wearing right now, that's by them. So when I went to the site visit and I bought it from there. Yeah. So this is the Assami, it's called the jacquard loom. Every household have a different kind of looms. They make their own with the wooden frames. So everyone have a little bit different structure. Like you can see in these two, these are a little bit different structures. As well as you can see in here. So this called as a shaft bars and the reeds that you can see in the model. And I start to design the building and how I come up from the handloom. I get the idea, like, so I'm using the same structure, horizontal, vertical wooden structures for the building structure. So because of when the construction going on, the villager peoples can make their can be a part of the construction. So they know how to make the loom. So if I make the same kind of structure, so they can use as a laborer, so they can get the opportunity. And I started to design some modular structures for the loja. It will use in my building. So I start with the horizontal reeds. You can see in the handloom that the chipboard, it's called the horizontal reed. That's a chipboard one. So I start to flip it over and try to make the both together and making the structure with the fabric, so they can use their woven fabric in the structure too. And the floorings will be the brick and sand, and the columns is wooden. You can see in here exploded hexagon of the 1x1 woven fabric is the top layer, and another woven fabric layer, and wood frame structure that's deriving from the handloom unit, and the wood columns will be used, and brick plus wood for floorings. And some other elements I am using for developing the structure: vertical wrap frame that used for spinning in the spinning process. So I start to make that kind of doors and structures with that with that same kind of methodology used in making that frames by the villagers. All equipments made by the villagers, so they know how to make the tools, so they can make the architectural objects. And I start to use the fabric woven technique, like vertical threads, like I transfer as a bamboo, and horizontal threads to tying up the open spaces. And you can see here making up the bamboo mat and doors and walls. And another job they are doing in the villages, they do the bamboo mat weaving. So I'm using the same material for the fill of the doors and windows, so they can get the opportunity to sell their products for the architecture. And I come up with the exploration of the building design. So one unit, I start to design a one unit with the, I change the roof in the building with the metal roof, and roof bracing for tying up that roof, and wood structure with the same kind of structure deriving from the handloom. And then woven bamboo mat panels I'm using for the walls, and the internal structure with the column structure. It's 5 columns stick together, and they have a space in between, so they can slide this bamboo mat in between the columns. And the shear wall is using for the stability for the structure, and the cross bracing for the vertical structure for the outside. And now we have a module of the building, so I start to do the case study, like how I can use that module and make the weaving institute. So I look at that one case study. It's called Gangamaki Textile Studio. It is in Uttarakhand. It's also in India. So they have a really nice kind of spaces. You can see in the first diagram, they have all the building have outer loggia and the outer corridor space, so they can do the spinning and other process at the outdoor, and the big courtyard in between, like 4 or 5 buildings, so they can do the dyeing and drying process in the courtyard. So like you can see in the images, they have bamboo woven roof, and the upper layer is the thinner transparent material for the allowing the sunlight. And this is a basic plan and the sections for the case study. And I was also looking at what they have existing in the village. They have a factory typologies in the villages. They have big shed for the weaving. It's hold like 16 to 20 units in the one factory, and the living spaces around it. And in the courtyard, they do the dyeing and drying process. And they also have the pond, because in Sakuchi, before the weaving comes, before the silk comes, there was the main business of the Sakuchi was the fishing. So they start to earn money from the silk, so people move, and silks. You can find, when you go to the Sakuchi, you can find ponds nearby the weaving area, so they can, meanwhile, free time they can do the fishing and they can sell the fish. And single family house typology. So some people are doing for their own weaving materials, so they use the living room as a main weaving area, and the backyard used for the drying and stretching, and the street used for the street sizing. So you can see in these images too. And I come up with this plan with my case study, and what I look in the Sakuchi, what kind of spaces they need, and based on the process they do for the weaving. So I start to put the weaving units around the periphery, so people can see through the bamboo mat what's going on in there. It's always been the part of the street. And The loggia will be in here. This will be the main street. Simultaneously, I was working on the urban plan, so we will see in our other slides. So we have a dyeing area in the center, dyeing and sizing area, so they can use this courtyard as a drying process and the stretching process. And the street also will be used for the stretching process. I put it in here because waving, all the way from the waving, they can get the raw material from the center. All the people have the same distance. And this is a circulation diagram of the campus. It's more horizontal and linear, so you not get lost. And there is strictly pedestrian, but I'm allowing the emergency vehicular circulation. And the water body, they can collect the water, runoff or rainwater and the wastewater from the dyeing and drying process. They can fill up there and they can treat that water and clean that water and reuse that water. And this diagram is showing just the courtyard space, and here is like covered outdoor space. And so we have a like institute now. So I wanted to put this institute as in new urbanism as a centerpiece, as a main center of the new urbanism. So I was looking at the site. Like, this is the Sakuchi village. Orange buildings are main markets, household that they're viewing the houses. So I think to bring that, I think to choose that site to same they have a weaving, all the weaving units, so it's bring to here at the sites. And the purple one is showing the Gandhi Ashram. That's an existing place, so it's a tourist place, and it's right next to the river bed of the, it's called the Brahmaputra River. It's one of the biggest river in India. So you can see the couple of images, and this village is like 12 kilometers away from the railway station and 28 kilometers away from the airport. So this is the render site plan with the showing constructed hydrological structure. So I was thinking to bring the all runoff water with the using for the farming for the campus, which I'm generating in the urban design. This is called as a Bapuji Path. It's a main Sakuchi road, and the Gandhi Ashram at the site. So this is more closer to, this road is really wide and 30.5 meter wide road. And the view study, like this right side have a green view and the Gandhi Memorial view at the bottom, and the river view on the other side, green view. And the sun diagram, the sun is like in the summer, sun is really high, so don't need to make a really overhang for that, and the winter sun is low. And I was looking at also the farm typology. It's a little bit like far, like 3 to 5 kilometers from the village. So they do the farming. They have a farm typologies, like linear typologies, like farm and the water, farm and the water. So they can use water as a fishery plus can use for the agriculture. And this was, I was looking at how the town was developed during the time. So the villages developed was started from the main junction of the two roads where the main temple is placed. In India, like lots of towns and small villages are generated from the one point. There is always a temple. So this is just Sakuchi village. Sakuchi village map is showing the just buildings, like they have a 1-story, 2-story, and 4 stories. And I start with the silk weaving institute as my centerpiece. So I go first and I start to develop the other surrounding spaces. Like I'm using the existing grid of the Gandhi Ashram, which is already there. So second, street is always, in India, street is always for the social, used for a social interaction. So I start to laying out the street right front of the Weaving Institute entrance, and maybe the loggia will be used for this ceremonial space. They can use as a sitting. And this is a circulation diagram of the street. Outer street will be a vehicular, and internal streets will be strictly pedestrian. So I think to bring colonial buildings that have already exist on the villages. Like they have like smaller houses and the shops right next to each other. So I start to put same kind of structure. So I don't want to change the fabric of the village. I don't want to put the new kind of architecture in the village. And the shops, I start to merge this building with the shops, and the homes will serve as a habitation and shops will bring the economy. They can live in their homes and they can sell their stuff in the shops right below or right next to them. And then I start to think about the farms. They're gonna produce the raw material on site, so they don't have to bring from the outside, and they don't have to buy that because it's like really expensive. So I start to bring that water body and the run of water from the village, so bringing it with the canals. And this is an ecology diagram for that. So one side they can use mulberry trees for growing the silkworms, and other side they can use seasonal crops like the sugar cane, other crops. So the pond sedimentation will be used as a fertilizer for both the side farming, and mulberry trees will use for the silkworms, and it goes to the silk factory. And west of the silkworms will be used as a fish food, like vice versa in here. And I wanted to bring the spirituality throughout the campus, so I start to put the temple at the start of the street, and in the middle, and the mosque at the last, so it will bring the people, all religious people. And this is I come up with the master plan. So we have all the shops and the housings at the edge of the surround of the main weaving institute and the Gandhi Ashram, and we will have a private weaving space at the end, so tourists can see all the processes in here while they are walking on the street. And this is a circulation diagram for the visitors, and the viewers. Visitors can move throughout this site. They can allow to go there, but this is strictly private for the viewers who live for the private factories. And this is a kind of axon. And let me travel you through the urban plan. So when you come up here, you will have a parking here, and then the main entry plaza. And when you walk through the street, you will see on the right hand side loggia outside, so it will catch the people inside the loggia with the fabric they're making on the institute. And when you go further under the loggia, you can see at the right courtyard, this one, drying process is going on. These panels I'm taking from the weaving units. It can move on the two beams. So that kind of the panels I can use for the drying and the stretching. They don't need the tools. And when you go under the loggia, you can see the left hand side and looking backward, you can see the left-hand side, the entrance and the fabric, and the other side, shops. You can see the stretching going on the street. Some shops, they are selling their stuff. And when you go further into the loggia, you can see another courtyard with the stretching and drying stuff, and with the woven panel architecture at the wall they used from the villagers woven mat. And when you go further down in here from the courtyard and you come up with this space, you will see both the spaces simultaneously. There's the weaving going on here and other like stretching and stretching process going on, spinning process going on here. So throughout the campus, you will see all the process of the weaving. And for the master plan, when you go further, you will see the fish market in here, and the view. This view is like the main outer street view. So where the villagers lives there, and the mixed-use buildings with the same architecture of the village. And this is a diagram. We looked at it, and when you go further, you will see the private dyeing and drying area. You can see this view. They have a bamboo shed made out from bamboo, and they will have an outdoor space for the spinning and drying process. And this view is showing one of the processes going on, cocoon storage space. They will have a bamboo stand again, and woven panels on the doors and windows, and the fabric for the ceiling. And these diagrams is showing the use of the central space. Like it could be used a weekend market and community gathering and culture performance and village big. Thank you.
I liked how you talked about the full life cycle. Can you talk a little bit about, there's two questions. One is about the solar orientation and how you dealt with that with the loggias in the urban plan, and then a little bit more about the column structure. I don't think that was quite clear on that. So I asked about the Okay, so in any event, can you address the solar orientation and the loggia placement to help with that, and then just talk a little bit more about the column structure. So you were saying it was made up of several pieces and how that works.
So I put it in loggia in here because I wanted to make the street as alive so people can see all the things in here. But this is the north side of the building, so there will be I thought it's a good place for the putting the like that, so they can use the space for the city while the ceremony and something going on here. That's why I put like that. And for the column structure, you can see in this drawing, it's a 5-column structure. It's a 2x2 5-column structure, and it's joined by a C channel in between that. And these panels will be sliding in between that grooves, and it will be connected with the steel panel to the ground, and the concrete footing will be underneath of that.
Did you make that with smaller components because of the scarcity of wood, or what was the reason for the multi?
Oh no, because of I wanted to structure like that so villagers can build that. Not, yeah, I don't want to bring the engineers and professional workers over there. I wanted to give the opportunity to the villagers, so I tried to maximum make the design from the loom, how they create the loom. So
is this on now? So, first of all, there's a tremendous amount of thought that's clearly you've had for this project, and so congratulations on getting here. I have two things that actually go back to what Cecily had asked about, and that has to do with the loggia. And there's so much here, I'm still trying to digest it all, so humor me for that. This is a fully new planned area.
yes.
So when the question is about the loggias to the north, I would expect the loggia to be on the south to allow more light to be coming in from the north, more moonlight. And since you made that plan, you have the choice to put it anywhere you want it to, and to put the social space anywhere you want it to. So I think maybe there's going to be some more thought about the nature of that building and maybe treating either side a little bit more different based on light and access and sun. And then I think there's a river somewhere.
Yes, it's
Talk about how this plan addresses the river at all?
it's like a little bit far from here, so I think to bring the canals directly to there, and further down to the district, I was thinking to develop the riverfront. It's called the river cut, and the rest of other things will be the green.
So is that like a 5-minute walk? Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And are the canals meant to provide transportation, deliver goods?
No, it's really smaller canals for using just the water and do the fishing. You can see in these sections, like in the building scale versus the canal scale.
Can you define exactly where that section is through?
Yeah, it's from here to the looking that way.
Okay.
So you can see this big guy in here, and the temple is there.
So,
I like to start with the consistency from weaving machines to the architectonic quality of what you've done. It's sort of like tatami mats define Japanese buildings. And I think you've carried that through in such an interesting and delicate way, and you can imagine people, making these things themselves, that you understand the construction. And having been with you last year this time, and seeing your progress of understanding construction and how it can be expressed in architecture. And even the fact that you drew these and you drew them as if they were from the weaving machine. So this is just one sheet, you kept rolling it up and you kept drawing.
Yeah.
So it's a consistent way of sort of expressing, the end result of weaving and making fabric. So very interesting, because at first I thought, why are you going old school and drawing?
Yeah, because it was my thesis was like all about the hand weaving. So me and Yana was thinking about how we present our thesis, and we decided to all the way go through by hand. Let's show them what our hands can do.
I wish you had presented more to these though.
yes.
Because they are really beautiful. They're subtle and delicate, and the craft comes through, and your knowledge of the craft comes through them. So I wish you had spoke a little bit more, so that you said it's a little form.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had the exact same thought. I actually thought at the beginning, like these like images of the sequence, like I was like writing down the notes about this kind of like film strip of telling the story of the weaving. It was just beautiful. And then you started talking about your axons, and you're still standing over there, but you have this incredible thing that you've put in front of us. So I thought that you should have done more of that, like use the boards. We don't always have to have PowerPoint. I mean, part of the cool thing about being here for a thesis review is to look at drawings and models and things that you've done. And I agree. from taking that kind of film strip idea through to the details of the loggia and the kind of structure of that and the assembly of it and the craft of that is really beautiful. I mean, it's interesting that you did it by hand too, and I knew that would probably be part of the conversation, and I applaud you for doing it. I do think though that you need more line weight and more like when you take that on. It was interesting because looking at the images on the screen, they were much crisper, and it was like, I want to look at those, but that's crisper, and so somehow the working of it and the kind of ripples that are now on the vellum and stuff, it's hard to overcome. So next time, like if you were to redraw all this, there might be a different strategy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you learn something about the process of that and like what it means and how do I overcome that. Because I love the idea of this orange and the orange coming through, but I wish it was like more vibrant. I wish it was more vibrant. And then the last thing, sorry to harp on drawings because I do have thoughts about the architecture and the planning, but I also think the perspectives, like of everything that I've seen, I think the perspectives are the things that disappoint me the most because I know that you can draw. And I like these little circles that constrict me into them, and those circles really hurt those perspectives, and I wish they were bigger and brighter. And I was like, to me, I wanted to see the narrative go from how it's all woven to me walking through it, and they're just not. I can see a lot of cool information there, but I have to really, really look, because it's not sharp enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you have the pieces of walking through. You have so much character expressed in some of the views and your street section, and they relate to the pieces that you have in the architecture, but we never got to talk about any of those. I mean, you had a great presentation, you had a lot of material, but some of those relationships I think are important to express verbally as well as visually.
It might even be like a layout thing, like I almost want the perspectives to like run a film strip across like right at eye level.
Yeah.
Because to me that's the power of your scheme is like how do you feel in that stuff.
Well, I'd like to echo my colleagues' comments about your whole introduction. It was a wonderful education for me. And just a really fabulous thesis program. So congratulations on that. A couple of things occurred to me at the larger scale. The project in Mexico.
In India.
Oh, was that in India? That had a central courtyard. That was your.
That's also in India, yeah.
Oh, that was in India. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it had a central courtyard. And if I understood your presentation correctly, this is a point of transition for this community, going from everyone working in their own home or leaning against the outside wall of their own home to a beginning of industrialism, where they brought together. Which has pluses and minuses from the society's point of view. I'm interested to see that there isn't a daycare center or anything. And it seems to me that a lot of people who were working in their home were also able to take pots off the fire and take care of kids while they were working. So that's, from a social point of view, I think, an interesting thing. Maybe we had another 2 months to look at to incorporate the whole family being here. The other thing that strikes me is that there isn't a central courtyard. This is now an institution as opposed to individual workers.
Yes.
And there isn't a central courtyard, and there's a sameness to the open spaces in terms of proportion and size. And so one question for you is, why did you do that versus a central courtyard that would reflect this new scale of the institution? So that's one question. And then my next question or comments really are about the weaving on top of the loggias, which is a fabulous idea. I'm struck that the strips of cloth are both running, and the different layers, they're both running in the same direction, versus weaving is always interwoven with the web, the warp and the web. And so I'm curious about how that got developed. And also in thinking that in your kind of space frame, rectangular geometry of the roof structure, each cube of space in there has 8, I forget what count them, different bars defining it, 8 places to tie cloth to. And I'm wondering if you had more time, would you look for a richer weaving fabric, I don't know if it has to be disassembled and non-suited, they have non-suited in this area?
Yes.
So do they have to take this all down?
Fabric is fine in monsoon.
Okay,
But they can,
it's wet and dry.
as I showed you in the other one, with the big courtyard one, they have a transparent material, they can put it over.
Oh, gosh. Okay. So I'm curious about that because the weaving samples there are really, really intricate. And you mentioned the jacquard loop, which has this wonderful ability. This is not hand woven, this is machine woven, where one side of the fabric looks like this, and the other side looks like that.
Yeah.
And that's one of the characteristics.
So,
Who's next? Yeah. Oh,
so I decided to, so in this institute, I decided to put in the layout in this way because of the taking this existing geometry of the Gandhi ashram, making the courtyards like in a U and having the two separate courtyard for serving these two places. And I do have same kind of typology in the private viewing area with the bigger courtyard. So this is just for the visitors who can come here, who can see, who can learn. So that's why I choose this layout for this one. And for the private viewers, for the villagers, I use the same kind of typology like you showed in my presentation. So that was the...
So who is it doing the activities in the weaving and the dyeing? It's more of a display aspect?
Yes, like for the visitors, and it's not a full-scale dining area, just showing the smaller things. Like if I'm a visitor, I go there, I can learn how to dye like in smaller scale, but they're doing everything in bigger scale in here.
So this is an industrialization of individual craftspeople into one institution. This is really a museum display area.
I can't hear you.
This is not on? It is. It is on.
I didn't hear. What's that?
We really need a mic.
I don't need the mic.
We really need
You
a
really
mic.
need the mic.
Right, right.
Hold for 2 seconds. Oh, that shut it off.
Just repeat the last, I just wanted to.
We need a mic.
Yeah, full
Industrialization.
So this isn't what I first hypothesized that it's an industrialization.
Wait, we cannot hear that. It's not just the sacred audience here.
So-
It is the back of the room. Otherwise, this turns into a Latin mass.
So we all need to listen.
Could you turn that up a little louder? A little louder? Just the top knob. Top one.
You just have to put the mic right up next to
You have to speak directly into the mic.
Another education.
watching Phil Donahue a lot.
Yeah, but I'm not walking around. Okay, so my initial hypothesis was that this was the creation of an institution to bring the craftspeople out of their houses to work together and as a kind of cooperative.
Yes.
But now I'm hearing that that's not the case. They still will be working at their homes.
No, this is also the weaving area, big weaving kind of factories. But I choose to design just for this thesis institute. But there will be also the main kind of factories of so many people can come to. Yes, that's a small school.
Institutional version.
Oh.
I think you're right.
I'm kind of a little disappointed in that because I think the idea of a cooperative that brings people together to work together and then the tourists who come by can watch them doing real work, is incredibly meaningful. And unfortunately, as we move into the future, cooperatives are really what can glue a new community together in a way and give them autonomy.
Yeah, so I think a couple of talking points or thinking points for you as you go through this. One, I think, is the orientation that I alluded to in my question, to try to get that out. I do think maybe some of the reason of people sitting outside to do those tasks is for air circulation, but also for sunlight and being able to see. And so if they're inside their home, it's a little darker, it might not be as well ventilated. So some thought as to not just using the loggia as the storefront, but using it as the space that is in the correct orientation for for the environment, I think is critical. I think talking about solar, you have a lot of flat roof architecture, rain collection, anything like that would add to this. Because I think a lot of the limitations on people is the inability to work into the evenings or use sources of fuel that may not be very advantageous to their health or for the circulation. So I think those couple of things, and then dyeing, I think you talked very well about filtering that water. I'd like we've seen a little bit more on that process, because I think dyes traditionally can be pretty caustic and polluting, and if we're...
In Sakuchi, they are using the natural dyes.
They are, so they're mulberry and
Yeah.
others, okay, so that's good. So I think, yeah, like, let us know that. I know it went into a lot of depth. The other point, I think we're harking back to what you said about the richness of the display. When we were looking at the presentation on screen, I think the fabric really had a lot of depth and dimension to it. While I like the use of the color to highlight, almost as in, you know, the monochromatic with a hint of color reminds me of almost a comic strip more than a film strip, but that highlighted punch of color is great, but I think there was a lost opportunity to use the color to highlight the two motions that come together to form the architecture, you know, the vertical and the horizontal. I think that could have been a little bit more dynamic, where I feel like this is highlighting some of the fabric. You know, I would have liked that translated into the architecture to see that. Yeah, so, but I think, you know, in terms of a comprehensive thesis project and your investigation and learning about the systems that go into that and translating that through, I think very good. You know, we're being picky almost, but I think, you know, even the thought of presenting this by hand. So we're talking about, you know, that extra fine tuning that could have, you know, brought it to another level. That's, you'll go through, you know, you'll take this and go further into your profession now, so just take these as comments moving forward. Don't redraw all this.
So just really quickly before I pass it down here, it is very logical, the way you got to the architecture. I wonder though, I was extremely taken at a distance from the motion and the fluidity of the drawing to the left here. And while I understand, of course, the weaving, that's clear, I just wonder if you ever considered a scheme or have a process to show that considers doing something different that is not rigid, that is fluid like the fabric they're making, right? So the looming and, yes, it's always taut, and so it doesn't really express the fluidity of the fabric that they're actually making. And so I wonder if you ever explored anything of that nature for the structure.
I didn't understand your question.
She's asking, so every time you show the fabric and the structure, it's taut, and she's referring to that drawing where, you know, the fabric also can be loose and have non-orthogonal forms.
And the actual structure of the wood is all very orthogonal, and I'm just wondering if you ever did anything more fluid.
Yeah, I was thinking to use like loose kind of fabric in this courtyard spaces while they're in the process. They can, like, do the drawing in here. It will be the covered space for that courtyard, so it will be the loose kind of like that. It was I was thinking to do the viewing, show as a secondary objects, like it will change the colors during the daytime, like in the morning they are putting the blue fabric or something here, and come afternoon it will be the different. So I was thinking to like that, using the...
What she was asking though is, instead of that, you went in the direction of using the wood as the structure, like just like the loom. But another possibility would be to think of fabric in tension, but also even in compression, so it kind of bows, as a way of building up the actual structure instead of the wood, right? And it's a different approach. It's a totally different paradigm, which is interesting. And I'll say we didn't go there.
Yeah.
It was just always that, you know,
different iterations of the wood structure, thinking about bamboo versus, straight pieces versus big pieces, but to think of maybe the fabric as a tensile structure or as something that is loose as part of the structural language is really interesting. But I don't think, maybe you did.
Yeah.
I want to commend you. I love your analysis. So you did a really consistent analysis and fairly comprehensive, so it brought me into it. And your drawings, your hand drawings are beautiful. I really want to commend you. We can have some critiques of certain things, but overall, I think it's very nice. I do have some inquiries, some questions about how the gendered nature of this work, or it appeared to be the gendered nature of this work, how that plays out in how you design this. And the one thing that struck me was how much the floor was part of the work. The women were sitting on the floor, the people were always seemingly working on the floor. And I think that could have set up some exploration as to, so we have the roof, you have the metal roof and everything, you have all the components of this building, but the people are on the floor, and there's not much said about how the floor responds to what you're trying to do, and I think that could have been an opportunity for that.
So, when I went there, I seen the lots of houses, I talked with them, I seen almost the spaces have sand and loose bricks on the top of that. So when you see, they can move, like, they can move as your weight or a little bit on this, and with the sand. So I thought I can use the same material palette for my floor.
Yeah, I think your section shows a lot of that movement. So maybe you can tell us about your section and how you did think about that. Because I see there are, almost looks like a gutter and curb situation. There's raised floors. Could you talk us through that? Because I think that's a very valid point in your.
Yes. Rest of the other buildings, like as the village has, like other outer buildings, that's on the street. And this is the Weaving Institute. I decided to take out one step because of the rainwater flowing there, and putting the girders will be hiding underneath of the roof, underneath of the floor, so it can collect the water. And main courtyard spaces, I think about to make it as a lower than the floors, so they can do the dyeing and drying process, so water cannot run into the buildings.
So I'm going to try to do this in like 15 seconds. That thought about the floor has been resonating with me the whole time. And like the beauty of those kind of axiometrics and looking at the roof. Like I'm imagining, I want to see like a floor rendering of like the way that maybe the bricks are all dyed differently and they all interweave and they create some pattern on the floor. So, and then I started thinking about that from an urbanistic standpoint. I think the part that I wish would have gone a little further is that all of this is brand new. None of this existed, which I didn't know. When I first started looking, okay, well, you're inserting something into something that exists. But in fact, I think you isolated yourself. You made, if this is truly an urban campus, like why couldn't the gallery be on that side? You actually pass between it, and then it creates a courtyard on the street, unless you're literally trying to gate this thing, which doesn't seem to make sense. So, and then the other part of that, we talked about the loggia, like being on this side, and just, it's like, I want sometimes the loggia to be on the inside, and I want the loggia to be weaving, so that these buildings weave into the texture of that street. So it almost feels like you've entered a precinct, but it happens kind of episodically. So maybe that was 25 seconds.
I'm getting signs from Carl that we need to end this now. So, Mohit, congratulations. You've been incredibly productive and persistent. You've always brought new things to every desk crit. I think I'm really happy with the way that you got into the measurements and details of the architecture. I think you were able to dig deep, be inspired by the loom, actually look at the metrics, to come up with, the loggia piece, the panels, and the structural system. I think in this conversation, I'm realizing the roofs and floors are huge opportunities. Like that every single rooftop is used actually also for weaving, and that adds a whole new layer to the solar orientation conversation. So there's even more to explore at the building scale. What I love about what you proposed is, and it was always a question of like, I think this gets back to the urbanism question. Is this a museum? Is it an institute? Or is it urbanism? And you kind of floated somewhere in between. I think in your urban plan, we still see you are ambivalent about it, which is okay. What I love, though, one aspect is that the looms, the weaving, they're beautiful artifacts, right? And so in some ways, you took the museum approach, right? Where you said the building kind of steps back and allows the fabric and the artifacts to be, front and center. And I think you could have approached it other ways. But, I appreciate that we can see you chasing that through. What most excited me about the project was the potential for urbanism. That this silk weaving is a new way a very, very old way, but also a new way to think about low carbon, sustainable urbanism. And that this dying craft might be revived as a way of saying, look, we need to develop differently. We need to go back to the holistic way of living so that we don't pollute the river the way we've been doing it, so that we're creating good markets where people have fair trade. And I saw you go through many iterations of that urban plan. I think there's still more to be done, some wonderful ideas here. But to me, as you join the conversation of architecture, I think this thesis and the urbanism it suggests is really, pretty radical in some ways, right? Like taking this tradition and pushing it into contemporary conversations about carbon and urbanism. So that was exciting to me, and I was glad you explored that too in this project. Congratulations.
Thank you.
We're going to go on the other side and